Salam and peace. And this is salam and peace, which we miss all the time. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, as well as on muslimnetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, and Raku and our social media as well. It was pretty early here. I recognized that I need to be part of America. And one window which opened up for me, not as much as my effort, but as the effort of the neighbors of other faith, was interfaith. And I got elected as a trustee of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And this is a very old entity established in 1893. Right there where the Art Institute is, that's where the first Parliament of the World Religion was held. So I felt pretty honored, became a trustee. And while I was there, I will listen and learn and connect. They were all nice people. They still are nice people. But sometimes nice people are just within themselves, being nice to each other. And that seems to become a work in itself, and conversation and a dialogue. I was more interested in how interfaith can engage the broader society for a change at home and change abroad. And that's where one of those usual Israeli bombing Gaza came into me. And I presented a resolution asking Parliament of the World Religions to ask Israel to withdraw and asking America not to provide arms to any side, but humanitarian aids to all sides. And people were looking here and there. Somebody did second it. But I was told the Parliament does not talk on these issues, does not pass any resolutions. So I told them that you talk all the time about Nelson Mandela and Dr. King. These people were not known for silence. That's where a chair of the board, I think it was Chair Emeritus, he told me, Malik, you need to go to AFSC, it's the American Friends Service Committee, and people who are like you are from there. So I showed up, and that's where there were 4 white folks sitting. One of them were the executive director, Michael. Other people were a bit surprised, but he stood up to welcome me, offered me to sit down. And that's how I connected with the American Friends Service Committee. And that became my vehicle of connecting with the anti-war movement and connecting for the all sort of peace movements. And the marches will start from there and will work. And that's where I met Jennifer Bank. And she was working on Palestine. And that was another thing which connected me with American Friends Service Committee. So today we'll talk with Jennifer Bank about Gaza. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you again and to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you what you do, and thank you for Michael. May God bless him wherever he is. And you have been going to Gaza for a while, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How you got connected with that? Did you show up American Friends Service Committee as I showed up?
Well, actually, I was born Quaker, and the American Friends Service Committee is a Quaker organization. Although, like you being welcome at the table, we have staff around the world that come from all different faiths. But Quakers have had a connection to Palestine for over a century, actually.
I thought you guys showed up with the Crusaders.
Yes, no, it's not. It's not Quaker Oats. It's actually a faith. There's about 85,000 Quakers in the United States. So it's a small religion that really centers on the idea of nonviolence and believing that there is that of God in every person. And because of that belief that each person is holy, we believe that one can't take the life of another human being. The organization, American Friends Service Committee.
I'm glad you have this concept. God Almighty has told us in the Quran exactly the same thing. Nobody can take life of another person. Killing one person is like killing humanity.
Exactly.
Actually, God told this to people earlier than us also, but it continued to happen. So 78,000 people carrying all the piecework of FSC on their shoulders.
Well, no, because we work with partners around the world and people like you and Palestinian. We have Palestinian staff. We have Jewish American staff. We have a lot of different people who are with us on this journey of trying to work for a better world. We were actually established in 1917 after the First World War because people didn't want to serve the military. They wanted to serve humanity. And so the early work that we did in Europe was to help the people in Europe rebuild after World War I. And it was before there was really international development, 1917. And these volunteers then realized that that wasn't important just to fix the wounds of war, but to really address the roots of violence and to start to work on issues of poverty and racism and injustice. And so early in our first decade of existence, we also worked with coal miners in the United States who were facing incredible injustice before there were unions and safety measures put in place in West Virginia. So that kind of early history. So Gaza, because of that, the United Nations asked Quakers to go into Gaza in 1948 to help with the refugee issue. So after the Nakba, after the catastrophe that came with the war of 1948, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes, and many of them came into the small area of Gaza, a small strip of land, 25 miles long and just 6 to 10 miles wide. And it was a community that wasn't prepared to have such an influx of refugees coming. So the United Nations asked AFSC if we would help with to help, set up clinics and healthcare and schools and clothing. But also we went with the intention that this was a temporary measure and that after the war would end, that we would help repatriate these refugees back to their homes, and which is in present day Israel. So the early volunteers, if you look in our archives of saying, we're trying to help these Palestinians go back to their homes, even just a few miles away in the greater Gaza district. But when we go, we're being fired on by...
Also, there are field notes by the FSC volunteers.
Yeah. And people were confused, like, wait a minute, we thought that these refugees should be able to go home and we need to work on reconciliation between Israeli Jews and Palestinians. But that, as we know, sadly, from history, still hasn't to this day been able to be achieved.
So has somebody gathered some of those field notes and published them?
Yes, yeah, they have. There have been several books written, and including many scholars who've studied their this early experience of Palestinians in 1948. You can see a lot of the archival footage. If you see some white people in the picture, they're probably Quaker volunteers that were there.
So they were filming also?
Is some archival footage, yes, taken of those of that time period, but also a lot of photographs, and again the the notes home, the letters and that were typed on old manual uh, typewriters and notes are in our archives in Philadelphia. It's a fascinating history.
When was the first time you visited?
So my first time was in 1982. I happened to arrive just as the Israel was invading Lebanon in 1982, and that it's a very pivotal year. But I was there on a study program and living in the old city of Jerusalem and looking. I was engaged in a project that was, or a course of study that was to study the issue from various perspectives. From I had Israeli professors, I had Palestinian professors, and it really helped me to see the complexity of the issue. But I also, it was when my eyes were open to what it means to have a military occupation, and to see how the way that lives were so utterly controlled by the Israeli military. And that now in 1982, there weren't as many settlements as there are now. But even at that time, you could see the increasing militarization due to the expansion of Israeli settlements into
Do you remember any person, any face comes to your mind when you visited first time?
Yes, I was thinking back this morning about because whenever it's hot out, I'm remembering when I was there on a work camp at the Birzeit University, which is one of the universities in the West Bank, and we were helping to build a rock garden, move rocks, big heavy rocks, with the students there. And I was a little nervous doing it because I'm really afraid of scorpions. And every now and then you'd lift up this big rock and there would be a scorpion. So it was very heavy, hard work. And I say that because I think that I was also feeling very emotional because one of the young men that was working with us, a student, was telling us his story about his family and how they were displaced and how he had been rounded up by the military in the middle of the night and put in prison and tortured. And he lifted up his shirt where you could see the marks of torture. And this was the first time that I'd ever met somebody who had been tortured before. And I was really overcome by this. And I started to cry. And I remember him saying to me, "Jennifer, I don't want your tears. I want you to remember my story and I want you to work for change." And I was so shocked, I was young and naive, and but it, that really stayed with me about, he wanted me to see the pain. He wanted me to know the experience. But like you in your introduction, it wasn't enough just to hear the story. We needed to act. And really, since 1982, I've felt really dedicated to acting, to telling the story of Palestinians, whether they're in the West Bank or Gaza, and trying to let people know what it means to live under Israeli military rule and why Palestinians desire freedom, and what are the systems that are in place, including our the blind support that our government gives to the Israeli government, how this keeps this suffering in place. So, yeah. I
Go ahead.
I did go back after that initial experience to be a volunteer teacher. The Quakers have had a school in Ramallah, in the West Bank town of Ramallah, since the late 1800s. And I went to be a volunteer teacher there. And After my first year of teaching, the first Palestinian uprising began.
Okay, let's take a short break.
Yeah.
And when we come back, we'll talk about Intifada because that changed quite a bit of things.
Yes.
This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Jennifer Bing, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. We'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Jennifer Bing from American Friends Service Committee. And we're talking about a topic which not many people talk about. And that's why Muslim Network TV is important, which you're watching on Galaxy 19 satellite and Amazon Fire TV, Roku, as well as our website, muslimnetwork.tv. So Jennifer, when Intifada happened, what year was it and were you there?
Yes, so I had been living in the West Bank town of Ramallah since 1986. And so when the uprising began in 1987, I was there, and it was actually an amazing, life-changing experience for me to witness, in part because of the way that Palestinians were so unified, the way that they, in spite of such adversity, of curfews, of killings, every day it was, you didn't know if you could go to school. All the schools were closed down, and since I was a teacher, that affected me. You didn't know if you could find bread that day. It was a very chaotic time. But it was also a time where people really felt that the word intifada means to shake off. So
that's what it means.
Yeah. So
I thought it probably means rise up.
Yeah, no, it means to shake off. And it means this shaking, it's like we want to shake off these decades of Israeli military occupation. And so it was a time where I think for many people who had up until that point thought of, that the West Bank, that settlements and the continuation of the status quo would just continue forever. It was really a time where people who were living under occupation in Gaza and the West Bank just said, no, it's enough. Like we want to live a life with dignity. We want to achieve our freedom, and we're going to resist. And so much of the nonviolent resistance that I witnessed, of people caring for one another, of, if Israel closed the schools, we would have schools operating in the homes. If Israel closed the health clinics, we'd create mobile clinic, or we, meaning the Palestinians at that time, would create mobile clinics, and people would be trained in how to give health care to one another. So it was really an amazing time. And for me as a teacher, witnessing my students, I was a teacher at a boys' school, and many of the students that I had were Palestinian Americans who came to back to Palestine with their families to learn about their culture and their religion. And so they were, I was kind of a link for them between their culture of Palestine, but also a connection to America and their home. So it was fascinating to see.
This is very different story. I mean, when even I think of Intifada, I think of a mob throwing a stone and organized uniform police officers or Israeli military officers. Mm-hmm. Throwing a stone probably are the two words which define Intifada, probably in the eyes of America, if anybody remembers. I mean, our memory is so short about all of those things.
Yeah.
Even Edward Said, may God bless his soul, when he visited Lebanon, I heard that he threw some symbolic stone. So how big were these stones people were throwing? Because what you're depicting is it was a sort of a campaign of self-reliance, not just throwing stones.
Right. I mean, there of course people threw stones to protect themselves. I mean, when tanks come into your neighborhood, when soldiers come in the middle of the night and do army raids and take your children from you to put them in prison, etc., like, people are going to resist. But and that was part of the resistance. But I think which is often not told, is the story of this nonviolent resistance that you could see. Even things, so I remember, because I was a teacher, that at that time it was illegal to have a Palestinian flag. It was illegal by military order to wear the colors of the Palestinian flag. So red, green, white, and black. If you wore it together, you could be arrested. And so, of course, at my school, in my art class, of course, every kid wanted to paint a Palestinian flag in the corner of their picture. Or if they were going to draw a rainbow, they would draw the rainbow in the colors of the Palestinian flag. It was these small acts of claiming one's identity that were so important, that really Israel at that time was so intent on destroying. So even a small thing like hanging a Palestinian flag outside of your house, or painting it on the side of the wall, soldiers would rush into the community and force people to erase the flag, or to take down the flag from the electric wire, or and this is where the confrontation really occurred in these. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if the soldiers just wouldn't come in, there wouldn't be this kind of confrontation. If they would stay in their own country and not come in with such military force, it would really have been a different situation. But I remember the kind of consciousness that my students went through at that time period of, some of them joining in demonstrations for the first time, or for the first time seeing people killed and shot. The idea at the time was by Yitzhak Rabin, who was the defense minister, said, we will break their bones so that they will stop throwing stones. So this force, might, and beatings was the policy to go and to quash the resistance. So you saw everywhere, villages, refugee camps, cities, everywhere. There was this kind of.
So when the kids go to, come to classes, I mean, during Intifada, you're mentioning they maintain schools. So when these kids are coming, are they writing stories of Intifada? Are they talking about what they were doing, or they take time also to think of the future?
Well, I remember so the schools were closed so much, so you never knew when it was open or closed. And I remember when we reopened briefly, I was teaching a group of fourth grade boys, and one of them came into the classroom late. And when you reopen after being closed, the school really wanted to instill discipline again, like don't let the kids run around, and they're used to being in the streets, and they're so active, so we need to have discipline in the classroom. So I'm not a big disciplinarian, but when one of my students came into the class late, I said to him, look, you're late to school, the bell already rang. And he had he was a small boy, he had his big backpack on, and he sat down at his desk and he kind of hung his head. And I realized I wasn't going to give him a hard time about being late to class. But that I did want to give him the space to kind of say what his worries were. You could tell just by his physical self. And I said, is there something that you want to share? And he said, there's just so much blood. There's just so much blood. And I said, what do you mean there's so much blood? And he said, they came in and killed people in my village last night. And one of my neighbors was put on the kitchen table, and he was bleeding all night long. And I was like, whoa, I'm not ready to deal with, I'm not prepared as a counselor to help this young man. And I really didn't know what to do. And he shook his head and he just said, there's so much death. I just don't know why we should keep living. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to say? And one of the other young boys in the classroom, mind you, these are fourth grade boys.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. The fourth grade boy turned to him and said, Muhammad, it's not about death. We need to live. We need to live because living is what our oppressors don't want us to do. They want us to give up. They don't want us to be educated. They want us to leave our land, and you need to live. And all the boys in the class stood up and they started clapping, and they're like, we are going to live. And they started chanting. I'm like, uh-oh, I'm really going to be in trouble now for not having discipline in my classroom. But it was such a beautiful moment of watching these young boys helping each other stay focused. And really that samud, that steadfastness that Palestinians have. And I was such a privilege for me to witness back then in 1988, and every year since then that I've been able to travel back and meet Palestinians, this desire to live, it's incredible.
Jennifer, do you know where those boys are today?
I'm not sure. No, I a few years ago, some of my students I've stayed in touch with. One of them is actually a journalist in Ramallah in Palestine. He's worked with the BBC and various things. And he had talked to me about wanting to make a film and going back and finding all these young boys who are now middle-aged men, what happened to them. And I've kept in touch with some, and but not all of them. And that young boy in particular, I probably could track him down, but I haven't. He may be living in the United States for all I know at this point. But there's so many experiences that I've had with Palestinians that have shared these very special moments with me, and that really motivates me to work for change. That to me, it's very sad to think that those experiences of young children being exposed to so much death and destruction around them continue to this day. That there still are Army night raids in the middle of the night where people are taken away to prison and tried in a military court system that's totally unjust. 99% conviction rate in military courts, and this desire to keep living and to stay steadfast. And particularly, you mentioned Gaza. That when I think about my first visit to Gaza in 1982, how easy it was to travel there from Jerusalem. You just got into a taxi, and 20 minutes you're at the Gaza border, and the border between Israel and Gaza. And there was a soldier who was in a little, it was like a parking gate, and just would wave you through. And there wasn't the kind of infrastructure that now really is sealed off Gaza. There weren't walls. The separation wall was not built back in 1982. It was much easier to go from different parts of the West Bank to Jerusalem to Gaza. And all that has changed dramatically.
Jennifer, we will talk a little bit how going from one place to the other place has changed. And you're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Jennifer Wing. We'll be right back after these messages.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. Past campaigns covered a wide range of humanitarian concerns. Through Bosnia Task Force, imams and leaders of Chicago's Muslim community worked to ensure Bosnia became a top national issue. This led to life-saving American policies in Bosnia. A key accomplishment was helping to get rape declared a war crime. Initiatives also included Kosovo Task Force, Central African Republic Task Force, and Flint Coalition, which brought awareness to the water crisis affecting the people of Flint, Michigan. Highlights of our work include supporting Black Lives Matter, Parliament of the World Religions, addressing climate change.
So wasteful consumption starts the ruthless production, and that's where we need all the fossil fuel in the world.
And prominent media exposure.
This is Imam Malik Mujahid, President of Justice for All.
And I'm the Director of Outreach for Justice for All.
And that's why we need to go back to what worked.
Today we're demanding an apology from the CEO of Costco.
The Chinese crackdown on Uyghurs and other Turkic people has only gotten worse.
Current programs such as Burma Task Force advocate for the rights of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, internally displaced populations, and all those denied freedom of movement and at risk of starvation. Through this, we mobilized thousands of calls to elected representatives. This paved the way for the U.S. to increase funding for Rohingya refugees from $30 million to over $600 million. 2 of our documentaries were featured on international news outlets. The Rohingya People, A Slow-Burning Genocide on BBC World News, and Rohingya Refugees Tell of Massacre was featured on CNN. We've organized rallies, UN mission visits, expanded presentations on campuses, promoted research and report writing, outreach to think tanks, media, and other influencers. Faith Coalition educates about the Rohingya genocide and crimes against humanity faced by ethnic groups in Burma. We've traveled to refugee camps, convened a meeting of Karen, Kachin, and Rohingya leaders, both to encourage cooperation and to guide them in congressional outreach. We organized Rohingya Advocacy Day. This led to over 100 participants visiting the offices of 60 U.S. senators and congressional representatives. Free Kashmir advocates for the people of Kashmir. Long-term goals include the call for self-determination, the end of the Indian military's occupation of the territory, and raising awareness of Kashmiri issues among the American people. After the August 5th reinvasion of Kashmir, we organized national protests in front of various Indian government buildings, partnered with Stand with Kashmir, and launched a petition condemning the Gates Foundation's decision to present Prime Minister Modi a humanitarian award. Save Uyghur informs Muslims and neighbors of other faiths about the ongoing cultural genocide of Uyghur Muslims and mobilizes public support. Our projects include boycotting Chinese products with our Fast from China campaign, pushing Bill S-178 in the Senate, and organizing a nationwide protest of Costco. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite as well as Amazon Fire TV and Roku. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Jennifer Bing, and these are sort of her memories of visiting Gaza and Palestine under Israeli military occupation. You were, Jennifer, talking about kids who are essentially counseling each other. You're talking about a 9-year-old kids, 10-year-old kid in 4th grade, counseling each other about watching somebody die, seeing blood, and in the torture. And those kids is still thinking that they want to live to free themselves. Do you think this desire for freedom will ever die for Palestinians? Because it has been 70 years, 70 plus years.
I don't think it will die. And it's really to the credit of the community that that they've been able to keep generation after generation, knowing their history, knowing their culture. And despite like all the obstacles, I do, you talk about the children, and part of the work that I did prior to coming back to the United States was to do documentation about the impact of the occupation and the first Intifada on children. And that brought me to interview many, many families, many, many children themselves about what their lives were like. And I remember being surprised often that even at a young age, children were very articulate about politics. I remember in Jabalia, a refugee camp, which is the largest refugee camp in Gaza, meeting this young boy whose mother said, "Oh, he's such a troublemaker that, when there's a curfew, she's always worried about him because he sneaks out and he gets on his bike and he's so difficult," And so I thought, I want to meet this kid, and so I met him, and he showed me his bike, and he was very proud. He's like, I can get around, and I can deliver bread to my neighbors, and I'm fearless. And I said, okay. And he says, but you and your government. And he says, who is this Dukakis? He was running for president at that time. And he's like, who is this Dukakis? He's not a good leader. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how is this, 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy in Gaza telling me about American politics? And so I said to him, so, you've watched, you seem to know a lot, like, about your community and about politics. And so what do you think about these soldiers that you see here? What do you think they say to their children when they go home, when they go home to their houses, when they're not here occupying you? What do you think about that? And he looked at me and he said, soldiers don't have children.
Oh.
And I thought, what is this boy who can talk to me about American politics and about his bravery and understanding how to get around in curfews, and he doesn't believe that soldiers have children. And that stuck with me, because the dehumanization of people and the kind of things that I know he witnessed in Jabalia, because I documented it. I saw the they called it the pond, but it was a pond of sewage because of the electricity, which is still a problem in Gaza, of not being able to drain all the sewage, that the soldiers would beat up the children and then break their bones, and then they would throw them in the pond.
Oh, in the sewage.
Into the sewage. And you could see at the clinic, by going to the clinic, all these people with abscess wounds and as a result of this. So it was quite it was important to me, after witnessing this, that Americans know that if you see an image of a child with a stone throwing it at a tank or a soldier, what is it? What is the experience that this child, that this society has been experiencing? And I think that for all of us who are committed to nonviolence and to peace, we have to look at the roots of conflict. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that motivates people to rise up and to address those issues? And sadly for the Palestinians, decades have continued since the American Friends Service Committee was involved with Palestine in 1948 and Gaza, that this desire for refugees to return to their lands and their homes. If you visit people even today in Gaza, women will bring out the key to their homes. They've kept the keys to their homes that are in present-day Israel, that are sometimes just a few miles away from Gaza, and they still can't return. So this desire and this knowledge that one day that they will see justice, that belief is strong.
Tell me, Jennifer, we hear in news, you mentioned that you research children. And I hear news and I see images in which a little kid is being snatched from the mother's or parents' hands and being dragged by Israeli soldiers. Some of them, being in their pants, little kids.
Yeah.
Why little kids? Why Israel goes after little kids?
Well, and right now I'm working on a campaign called "No Way to Treat a Child," and that it's a campaign that we are working on with Defense for Children International Palestine that is addressing this issue of the detention of Palestinian children. By law, under international law, Palestinian children under the age of 12 cannot be held in military, in prison. And so a lot of the statistics and focus for children is between the ages of 12 and 18 being when one is considered an adult. But as you said, you do see images of, and so a lot of our advocacy has been to try to stop this widespread and systematic practice of arresting children between the ages of 12 and 18 and putting them into prison and getting them to sign confessions that they've thrown stones, and which can carry a sentence of anywhere between 10 and 20 years in prison. Most children who are convicted of throwing stones, their general sentence is 3 months in prison. But as you said, that sometimes you see children even younger, 5, 6, 10 years old, being detained by Israeli soldiers. And where that happens traditionally is in areas where there is great conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. I talked earlier about walls and separation and people not seeing each other, but where there is connection is between Israeli settlers, Israelis who have colonized the West Bank and who are living in huge Israeli compounds that are surrounded by barbed wire. They have military patrols on Palestinian land in the West Bank. There's now over 500,000 of them. And in the towns and villages and refugee camps near those settlements, there is a lot of the army needs to patrol those areas in order to keep safe these Israeli settlements, so that you see the army coming in to make sure that the community doesn't rise up, they don't organize to try to resist the settlers and the settlement encroachment of taking more and more land and property and so forth. So part of what they do with children is children are the most vulnerable, among the most vulnerable in a community. So if you bring a child without a lawyer present, without their parents present into a confession, they're more likely to give up names so that they will say who in their community is organizing, who is it that is the leaders and that kind of thing. So children are vulnerable, and certainly it doesn't take much sometimes to make them give up names and give that kind of information to people. The other thing that it does is that
children are being used in some way to go after the adults, because children are innocent, they're not strategic, and they may not be tough enough to resist the psychological torture or physical torture technique used. I mean, even 12-year-old is a child for me.
Yes. Exactly.
Since 12-year-old is okay to be subjected to all of that, taken away from parents.
And also, what it means for the family unit. I mean, if you look at the objective of Israel is to have Palestinians leave. They want them to leave their villages. They want them to leave their lands. And so you put pressure on a family if a child is taken out from the home and the parents can't do anything about it, they can't protect their children, then when the child comes back from prison, do you think they're going to listen to their parents? You know, they know now that their home is no longer a safe haven for them. Their village is no longer safe. So it becomes a dilemma, I think, for a lot of parents of who do we really want to stay here and subject our children to this violence, and even within the family unit, how does one continue to provide protection, to be an adult to a child that, you know, at this point, you know, if a father is not able to protect the son, how much is the son going to respect the father? And then how, you know, so the whole breakdown of the family and the community is really apparent. And as I say, this is so widespread and systematic. It happens.
How widespread is it?
Well, since the year 2000, 10,000 children have been prosecuted through the Israeli military system. So they've been arrested, oftentimes in the middle of the night. They've been taken into custody without a family member or lawyer present and gained a confession, and then they are tried in a military court. A military court is where the military is both the judge and the prosecutor, and so that.
And we are still talking about 12 to 18-year-old.
12 to 18 years old. And a majority of the children are boys, but there are some girls that have also been arrested. There's a famous case of a young woman, Ahad Tamimi, that did make some international news because of her case, because so few, you know, it puts a face on these children and the conditions that they face in detention, which you know, their schools and
10,000 have been tried. Are there a whole lot of other people who have not been tried but taken in?
Oh yeah, every day there are Palestinian children that are detained on their way to school, and it's totally up to the oversight of the soldier. An individual soldier can stop you at a checkpoint on your way to school and say, "You over there, sit down," and blindfold them, handcuff them, and maybe sit there for the rest of the day in the sun. There is a military order that says, which is what the military law in the West Bank is, that says that one can be tried for disrespecting a soldier. So what does it mean to disrespect a soldier? Is it a disrespect to slowly get your ID card out rather than fast? Is it disrespect to keep your head down or not to smile? So how this is interpreted, it really is, it's up to an individual soldier. And so what this means is that the whole population, the whole you know, millions of Palestinians are at the discretion, under the rule. They really have no rights when it comes to an Israeli soldier deciding that.
Israeli judiciary system, I mean, do they get involved? I mean, human rights organizations, can they use any mechanism to stop these practices?
Absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, the organization that we work with, Defense for Children International Palestine, they constantly are bringing cases to the United Nations, and also to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. There are many Palestinian human rights organizations, both in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, and also within 1948 Palestinian human rights groups there. So definitely they have brought the case of Palestine to the International Court. There was a ruling on the separation wall that says that the separation wall is illegal under international law. But that was in 2005, and it's still, the wall still
Separation law meaning separation of children from their mother.
The separation wall that was built.
Oh, wall itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, in terms of in this country where we've made some progress is because we've brought the case. As I said, even many human rights organizations have documented this experience of children. UNICEF, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, even the U.S. State Department in its human rights reports over many, up until the recent administration, I should say, have included in their human rights reports this concern for the detention of children in military courts. So it's well documented. And finally, there are now members of Congress who are willing to speak up about this issue. And there is a current
Congress willing to speak out.
Yes, and beginning to speak out. The HR Resolution 2407 is the Promoting Human Rights of Palestinian Children Living Under Military Occupation Act. It's a long name for an act, but you can remember the number 2407 because we need to work for Palestinian rights 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So 2407 is the title, and there are 23 members of Congress who have signed on to that bill, including Representative Betty McCollum, who is in Minnesota, has really been the champion on this issue. She's a person that is very motivated by a sense of fairness and desire to protect children in all contexts. And so she has been really an amazing leader on this issue, followed, of course, by many members of Congress, including Ilhan Omar and Representative Carson, and many here in Illinois, I'm pleased to say.
Thank you so much, Jennifer Bink. I mean, you have been on this for a while, and we thank you, and we thank AFSC, and we thank Quakers. I mean, 78,000 Quaker taking the whole world with them. That's amazing. I wish I had 10,000 Muslim like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for.
You have been watching Muslim Network TV. We're always on muslimnetwork.tv, Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and YouTube and Facebook. And you saw what we talk about. We talk about peace, justice, fairness, and equity at home and abroad. Peace. Salam. And thank to our producer today, senior producer, Connor Mace, and thank you, Sumaya and Zahra Nadeem as well.